Hi, my name is Ilana Bergen, and I'm the founder and director of Diabetes and Me, as well as the co-moderator on POKed, which is Parents of Kids Enduring Diabetes. Diabetes and Me, our new type 1 support group online on Facebook. Check it out and join if you haven't already. And as well as supporting Team Helping, which is the book for newly diagnosed kids to help families and kids understand type 1 diabetes. But today, I'm going to be talking about being a parent of 2 type 1 diabetic kids. And I'm not going to, I'm full of hope, and I wouldn't trade my kids and this experience because, of course, it makes us stronger. Would I get rid of diabetes if I could? Absolutely. But I'm also a realist, and I want to talk about, the fact that it's not all sprinkles and rainbows. So what does that mean? It sort of relates to the fact that sprinkles are sugar and rainbows are, puppies and unicorns, and that we think that, everything is going to be fabulous. Well, I'm going to cover some of the highs, some of the lows, and the teen years can honestly be far from magical when you're the parent of a type 1, but we really are going to embrace the diagnosis and feel like we can achieve what feels impossible. But it can feel like a roller coaster some days. So you're not alone if you're feeling like this can be a challenge. And what makes me credible to talk about this, not only, am I the parent of 2 type 1 kiddos, both are teens, but I've been reading and been the co-moderator for over 12 years since my son was diagnosed, writing a newsletter, as well as hearing from parents from newly diagnosed rookies to veterans about their diabetes and their experiences, and connecting people with mentors as well. So I've heard a lot and about growing a community, and all of this is really important, not only for the parents, but also for the kids. And so I can't express that enough, how important that is. And so I'm really happy that you're here, that you found us, and that you've started to grow your own community as a part of Diabetes and Me. And so we're really happy to have you. I want to talk a little bit about some of the words that come to mind when we talk about, parenting type 1 diabetes, and talk about some of the things that people don't talk about. And I think that it's because of the words like shame, pride, fear, denial, and we'll talk about those reasons in a little bit. But I wonder if it's because, we want everything to be okay. We always want everything to be okay. And for a lot of people, their kids have really good control, and that makes it easy to manage. And for other people, their kids have just really, they're insulin resistant, and their blood sugars are like a roller coaster, and getting that little wave can be really hard, even if you're reducing carbs or you're exercising for 20 minutes in the morning and you're doing all of these things that the doctors tell you to do. You're pre-bolusing, you're, doing absolutely everything. And, sometimes it feels like you're putting in the work and you're not getting the results. And so within the, for your own sense of accomplishment, that can feel a little bit like, maybe I didn't get that unicorn that people are talking about, which, by the way, is on the internet. It's when you get a perfect blood sugar of 100 and people take pictures of their meters and share it online because they feel really proud of getting a perfect 100. And somehow we've, attached the word perfect to 100. So there's good blood sugars and bad blood sugars. And, that can make it really hard on ourselves as parents and on our kids or our loved ones, even if it's your spouse, your husband, or your wife. So I think that we really have to think about that it shouldn't just, us putting blame on the shame from, the outside world and them not knowing about type 1 and having ignorance, but also within our own community, making sure that we're not putting our own shame and our own blame on ourselves as well, because we're all in this. And again, just to help those who are asking, what are these other words like YMMV? Your mileage may vary. That means that everybody's diabetes is different and everybody's management styles are going to be different. Some of the other speakers spoke about how, Neil spoke about how he went on this road trip with these 20 bikers from New York to California, and all of them manage their diabetes in a different way. This is something that is really important for us to think about, is that, we're all going to manage our diabetes a different way. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and they manage it differently. At different times of the month, we manage it differently. And so, I know we all have our own diagnosis story, and I want to talk a little bit about mine for my kids, because my 2 kids was really different. And a lot of people always ask, well, how did you know? And so I'll talk a little bit about with my first and with my second. So for kid number 1, he was 4. He was a really even-keeled kid. He was potty trained at 18 months. And well, I'd like to take credit for that, but he was self-taught with the right tools, I guess. And he was happy at his preschool. And at the end of the year, the kids were passing around a virus, a nasty cough and cold that seemed to be, acting like a croup in my kid. So a croup is when you cough and you sound like a seal. That, my kid was the kid who got that croupy cough. And so we took him to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed an inhaler, which had, a steroid inhaler that would help him to breathe. Not unusual. That weekend, Grandma and Grandpa came out for a visit with their motorhome, and we went for a little adventure. We packed some snacks, a few drinks. We headed off and went to this exciting outdoor trek just a few hours away. Jared had a snack, a coughing fit, an inhaler dose, and then he fell asleep. And I should mention that at 4, he didn't nap anymore. So while he was sleeping, he also wet himself. Now, if I had said this under any other circumstance, I'm pretty sure my kids would kill me, except that half of you, or 3/4 of you, are saying, oh my gosh, that was me too, or that's my kid too, or thank goodness that, you're sharing this story because I thought I was alone. So, it happens. It's a part of having too much glucose in your body. It has to come out in some way before you have the insulin to let it out of your body. And so accidents happen. But it wasn't normal for himself. So when he woke up, he was more concerned about being thirsty than he was about being wet. So we passed him a water bottle, and faster than a frat boy on hazing day, he downed that water bottle and asked for another one. I knew something wasn't right. So I actually called the doctor and said, we need an appointment. And they asked me why. And I told the nurse that I was taking my kid off the inhaler. She said, you don't need an appointment to take your kid off medicine. That's your choice. I assured her that something was wrong and that he needed to be seen. And they couldn't see him for a few days. So it didn't seem anything too urgent. But, business as usual. We went back to school the next week, and it was the last day of school. So we're getting into summer, and the kids were making frosted cookies at their preschool. So they're adding their own frosting and enjoying juice as a treat, right? Why not? Well, my kid, after having this snack, clung to my leg, looking like he was going to slide down it like a fireman, land at the bottom of the pole, and fall asleep. And he was lethargic, and I just didn't want to wait anymore. So I took him to the doctor that afternoon. I went in and I asked for a urine cup. And they obliged, but they asked why. And I did have my daughter with me. And I remember the doctor telling me that I really didn't need to be worried. I remember him saying he's just nervous to go to kindergarten. It's, he's upset about the last day of school. And, and I really, not sure how the rest happened after that, but I do know he came back into the room and said, I'm really sorry, but it's diabetes. You're going to need to find somebody to take your daughter. You're going to be spending the next 3 days in the hospital learning how to take care of your son for the rest of his life. And so really some good friends, because we don't have family where we live, came and picked up my daughter until family could come into town. The ER was waiting, so was my husband. Met us at the hospital, and I guess that sugar cookie had a lot of sugar in it because our son's glucose when we got to the hospital was 700. And I didn't know this at the time, but it shouldn't be over 150 for 2 hours after a meal as a non-diabetic. And we were well past that point. So we found out that he didn't have ketones, which was also an incredibly lucky thing. They weighed him and we asked them to weigh him again. And we noticed that he had lost 6 pounds since he had been weighed just a week ago before he was put on the inhaler. And we really started to blame ourselves because when he was in the bath, hindsight is 2020. You start to think about, well, I kind of noticed his ribs were sticking out just a little bit. And, 6 pounds on a 4-year-old is a lot of weight. And so they assured us we were really lucky, we caught it early, and that our diagnosis story could have been really different. We spent the next 3 days being taught how our life would change. And then we were set free to replicate this in the new world, out in the wild. I really don't know how we did it. And I'm not even sure that I processed it. And I feel super fortunate because a week after, while I still hadn't processed it, a volunteer had called me to see if I was doing okay. And I remember her calling and saying, "Hi, just wanted to make sure, I'm a volunteer to see how you're doing with your son's diagnosis." And that was the first time I cried. And I remember saying, "I'm not okay," and she was so patient with me and she spoke with me. And I found out that she had a kid that was the same age within 2 months of my kid, who had been diagnosed at the age of 2. So she had 2 years of experience on top of what I had. And I asked her to be a friend. And she had mentioned that, well, as a volunteer, she can't really be friends with everybody she calls because she makes a lot of calls in the day. And fortunate for me and fortunate for all of you, she called back the next day and said, "Okay, let's do it. This is different. We can be friends." And Shanae and I have been moderating Poked almost ever since. So we were working on this parenting of kids experiencing diabetes newsletter and online support group ever since. And it was because we realized how important it was to actually have support at this critical time of diagnosis. And our local hospital completely supported us to the point that actually at the back of each discharge with type 1 at the Children's Hospital, they have our information at the back. And so when parents are ready, they can reach out and talk to us. And there was nothing like that when my kid was diagnosed. So that child is now a senior and he's getting ready to go to college. And that's a whole nother new challenge. But that was his diagnosis story. And I feel really lucky because I hear, a whole gamut of outcomes. And to know that 30% of newly diagnosed type 1 diabetics end up in DKA is a scary statistic. And so together we can work to also help to create more awareness about what are the symptoms of knowing that you have type 1 so that we can catch it early. And that's actually what brings me to kid 2. So kid 1 was 10 years old at the time. My second child, my daughter, was 8. And this story starts out with a strange happenstance of kid 1 being in the hospital, and urgent care actually, due to falling off a trampoline. And he had a sprained finger. And I know, we all say, what? T1s get hurt just like normal kids? We forget that normal things can happen to them sometimes because it always feels like everything can feel like it's type 1 related. And that's not the case. They are absolutely normal kids first. So yes, he fell off the trampoline at a friend's house. And I had just come in from work that day. And he said at school they had told him that he needed to go to urgent care. So I grabbed 3 protein bars, one for each of us, his sister, and we left. And while we were waiting for his x-ray, his sister started complaining about not feeling well. And the time is ticking, and it's now 8 o'clock. And I'm feeling like a horrible parent. And I called my husband and said, we have to work this out because, the ER wait is exceptionally long. We need to feed him a proper dinner, and I need to get our daughter home because she's not feeling well. And when we got home, she plunked herself on the couch and she said, I've never felt like this before. I feel really strange. I don't feel sick, but I don't feel well. Help me. I'm so thirsty. And I handed her a G2 because we had a big one from a soccer game that her brother was going to the next morning, and it was out on the counter. And she opened her throat like a baby bird, and in one single gulp, that entire double-sized bottle was gone. And at this point, you and I both know what extreme thirst means and what feeling sick means. And I told her to stop joking around. And she was confused at my statement. And I said, you know what being thirsty and what feeling sick means? She said, diabetes? And I said, it could be. So when your brother gets home, we're going to check your blood sugar. And moments later, with a splint on his finger, which was far less attractive in my opinion than the Lego one that I had made him for his last sprain, I asked to borrow his poker and his meter. We changed out the lancet and we tested his sister. He looked so confused. He's a really good kid. And he really didn't want his sister to have to go through what he was going through. We didn't want him to really have to, be there because we knew he would know what the blood sugar would mean. But we poked and we were all there, and her blood sugar was 380. And we knew that a hospital trip was in our future. Now, here's a side script. Let me just tell you that when she was 4 and my husband was on a business trip, she had a donut at a birthday party and wet her bed that night. I freaked out. I called the endo and I checked her blood sugar that night and it was 180. And the endo said, don't freak out. If you're really panicked, take an at-home A1C test and see what the averages are, because no one really studies what a healthy blood sugar is on a normal kid. And post donuts and birthday cake, they just don't study that. So the next day, I got a 2-pack of A1Cs and I tested her, and her first result was 4.2. She was fine. That was relief. The night of the finger sprain and the G2, when I tested her, her A1C had gone up to 7.4. Bleep. We knew exactly what was happening. So we were now armed with 2 numbers indicating the inevitable, 380 blood glucose and a 7.4 A1C. We tested her for ketones and she was clear, thank goodness. She wasn't in danger. So I actually called a Polk family who was a parent of multiples because I didn't really know anybody else who was. And I asked what they thought that I should do. I wasn't asking them for medical advice, but I was asking them, if they could do it over, what would they have done? And we took some advice, and knowing that our child wasn't in danger, she slept with us that night so we could keep a close eye on her. And we packed our bags that morning and we went to the ER. So things should have gone smoothly, right? Because we had these numbers, and when we get there, they check our blood sugar and it's 149. One number below protocol for admission. So they're ready to send us away. But I said, give us a minute. My husband ran to the coffee shop, which shall not be named, and voila, her blood glucose within minutes was back up to 300. And then we waited, and we waited, and it took hours. After 3 more hours of waiting, my husband asked if there was a diagnosis. He looked at us with uncertainty and said, well, we're on a path. And we asked the question, is there more than one path with an elevated blood sugar? because we didn't really realize that this path could fork. Is there really only one outcome? Because, we understand where this is going. And my daughter, who was working on becoming a better self-advocator, but is really a quite shy child, shouted out, "Do I have diabetes or what?" Good for her, I thought. She said what we were all thinking. He looked at us and said, "Yes." Just like with our son, we were sent to the diabetes education floor, and we were about to embark on a journey with kid number 2 on one that we didn't sign up for. She was a trooper. She did everything they asked for. And, when she found out, she said, "This explains a lot." She wasn't feeling like herself, and now she knew why. I think she was a bit jealous, actually, at all of the attention her brother was getting. She got pity from, he had got pity from some older relatives who, who felt sorry for him. And I hate pity because my kids aren't victims. They aren't sick. They have diabetes. So the next morning at rounds, they called my husband and I into the circle, and they announced us as the ones who had diagnosed our daughter. They said without us, she wouldn't have been diagnosed until she possibly could have arrived with DKA, because they could have ignored the data that we came to the hospital with. I actually believe that they've looked at their protocol since then, and that they need to start looking at a bigger picture rather than just one number of variance from admission. My daughter had been observing her brother for so many years that she actually said, "Can I cut this early and maybe go home in 2 days instead of 3?" And the hospital trusted us, and we were actually quite happy to go home and try and start our new normal again. So why and how does this all tie back in together? It actually comes back to community and the fact that doctors will and should become your number one resource when your kids get diagnosed with type 1, because suggested upkeep for pediatrics is to have a visit every 3 months. But while an appointment every 3 months can seem like really that often, sometimes, other times it can feel like an eternity between appointments. That's when you need to find your community. So when you need to find out or learn something, it's your fellow parenting type 1, people who've been parenting kiddos who have type 1, who have more experience. And 24/7, you will find these folks from around the world awake and willing to share online. And the internet, right? So with all of us being around the world and different time zones, there's always somebody else awake, which can actually kind of be fun when you're doing a 3 a.m. check and there's somebody else who's up to, or it's the middle of the day and they're checking in on Facebook to see what's happening. So you don't really feel like you're alone, but there are trolls, right? There's always going to be people online that are going to say things that will either disagree with your beliefs or try and steer you in crazy ways. And it's important to know where to draw the line. For example, cinnamon will not cure your child, if you're curious. There are many things like oils and vitamins and diets that will come up, and a lot of people will subscribe to those and use those. And that's great because that's working for them. But no one should ever tell you to take your child off of insulin. There have been cases around the world where children can be really hurt because parents are trying things, that can be, that can be hurtful. But just as quickly as those trolls can pop up with bad ideas, there are good, strong communities that will shut it right back down. So it's really important to consult your doctor if anything sounds, really strange. And I know it sucks that, we have to admit, that there is no quick cure that we're going to find out about online for today. But, we'll keep hoping and praying and fundraising and singing and dancing or whatever it is that you and your family or people or you do, because it helps us come closer to a cure. But, um, for now, and, cue the eyes welling up, there is no cure. So you can now understand that doctors alone can't and won't cut it. So what about your friends and family, right? The rainbows and the sprinkles say, yes, of course. They will be tremendous support. And I'm an optimistic person, but believe me when I say, unless you're going through it, it can be really a tough reality to understand unless you're living it. Invite your family along for learning sessions and close friends too. You will want backup. Even if you don't think you need it and you think you have this on your own, you never know when you might need help. And it makes people happy to help you, and them having information makes it a viable option. When my son was 4, I waited 3 years to even trust their grandparents to keep him safe under their care overnight. Extreme? Probably. But I needed to know what I was doing to be able to explain it in a way that allowed others to care for my child in a way that made me comfortable knowing that they would be safe. Plus, changes always occur, and parents of non-type 1s will say, but you said the last time XYZ. And they're right. Changes happen all the time, right? Daily, hourly, sometimes by the minute on how to care for a type 1. So pace yourself. We're in this for the long haul. If our kids choose to keep us in our lives that long, right? It's important for us to find our community, to find our people, and to find possibly a good family therapist who can help navigate the tricky waters of parenting kiddos. If there's a type 1 specialist in your area who specializes, don't miss this chance. I'm not saying you need one today, but if you do, or your kid does, know you're not alone. We all need help in parenting, right? Because kids don't come with manuals, or if they do, I didn't get one. And can someone please send me one? Because it would be pretty handy. And not burning out from managing type 1 is something you and your child, will go through. So what I learned from having a family therapist who dealt specifically and was a type 1 specialist in our area, they focused on a book called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And what's really funny is when I was a child growing up, I actually remember seeing it in my parents' house. And, our therapist said that the parenting techniques actually apply for type 1 parenting too, especially when we listen to our kids. Remember that as much as we're going through, they're actually the ones getting the pokes, the needles, the checkups, the blood draws, feedback on their blood glucose each and every day. And every night they go to bed, and without a doubt, they silently wish that they wake up for it to be gone every day. And they have to manage it every day. So while we're also worrying, they have their own worries. While we're nagging them or bothering them, they really do know what's going on as well. They might need a break. And so, those are great family discussions for knowing when to step in if a break is necessary before it gets to the point of a burnout, or, helping your family get through something like that. So, sometimes, talking about burnout or, just other people in our lives, I always have to I'm sorry, I'm like cracking myself up here, but when we used to write the newsletter, we always had a section about what other people would say that would really irk us or get under our skin. And, people will say like, well, at least it's not fatal, or my fill in the blank who's 89 has that, or my blank died of diabetes, or how much junk food did you feed your kids to give them diabetes? They're way too young. Or have you tried this natural remedy? Just put these onions in their socks, and before you know it, they'll feel better. Or they'll probably outgrow it. Or at least it's not forever. You're going to hear these things. They're going to be said to you. And, while we don't have a cure for diabetes, I think somebody once said, you also can't cure stupid. And so sometimes I remind myself that. And sometimes, if it's somebody that I care about, I take the opportunity to educate them. And if you're newly diagnosed, I do want to talk about, I've mentioned burnout. And before I mentioned that I actually cried when somebody called to check in on me. And that's because, we sort of talk about how we have to wake up every 3 hours to check on our kids after they're diagnosed, but because they're like a baby. Well, postpartum depression or baby blues, I sort of feel like, admit it or not, after diagnosis, your world has changed. And so is your job description as a parent. You're now what I call a pancreas parent. You will be guiding your child not only to become a productive member of society, but also to take care of themselves medically, physically, emotionally, and honestly work each day not only to stay alive, but we want them to do so while also accomplishing all of their dreams that they had prior to diagnosis. When I slow down to think about it, and everything that I just said, I have to remind myself, and I have to teach myself, and teach my kid to still be a kid. Because keeping themselves alive and still doing everything else expected of them requires them to be sane. So let's talk about some words that come to mind when I say that, because, fear and scared, and parents feel like, we want to fix it. And, we have anger and sadness, and we could be anxious, but think about our kids, right? They can be feeling overwhelmed or sad or different. Maybe if they're the only one at their school that was diagnosed with it, they can be feeling alone or like, why me? And they're all real feelings. And they're also great reasons to journal, to find your tribe and community, to talk, and also to give yourself some grace. Don't keep it up, all bottled up inside of you. Or, it will take its toll on you. It's important to be real with yourself. So remember that there's going to be a lot of highs and lows when you're taking care of your kids. And what's going to end up getting you through all of this is loving your kids no matter what, loving yourself, giving yourself grace and time and patience. Allow yourself to deal and heal. Allow your children to mourn if they need to. Have an I hate diabetes day if they need to. Some people celebrate their diaversary, the day that they were diagnosed, every year. Some people do it with a happy celebration with a cake, and other people use that day as a, feel sorry for yourself day, because you just don't do that every other day. So give yourself that one day to say, hey, you know what? Today, I'm going to let myself feel like it really sucks, And as parents, it's okay for us to let our kids know that we also understand that it sucks. It really sucks. And that we wish they didn't have it too. So, honesty is important. And again, I am not a trained professional. I am a mom with 2 type 1 kids. I co-moderate a board with over 10,000 parents of kids with diabetes. I also talk with a lot of adults. I've been on retreats with type 1 diabetic adults. I have led sessions with spouses and loved ones of type 1 diabetics to talk about the emotional roles and having grace and, what it takes to be a helpful and healthful partner for someone with type 1. So remember that it's important that we all stay healthy. So take care of yourself And I hope that I didn't just ramble on, that there was something that you gained out of this. And as we wrap up the summit, that you were able to glean and get a whole bunch of new tips and information, hopefully inspiration, and a new zest or excitement for something that you're going to try. Maybe just pick one thing that you learned from any one of the speakers, and try it and see. Or maybe watch a video with your kid and ask them if there's something that they want to apply. Or maybe just an excerpt of somebody's video. Like, I think that there's great portions of every video that kids might enjoy, or that they could learn something from at different ages, of course. So thank you so much for attending the Type 1 Summit and for supporting Diabetes and Me. And we hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye.